And ma'am, do you see the person today here in court who admitted to zipping up Jorge Torres in a suitcase?
Yes, I do.
Do you see the person today here in court whose voice you heard on the suitcase video taunting Jorge Torres?
Yes.
Do you see the person here today in court who admitted to you flipping Jorge Torres while he was in the suitcase?
Yes, I do.
And do you see the person today here in court who admitted going to bed while Jorge Torres continued to suffer in the suitcase?
Yes, I do.
Could you please identify that person by an article of clothing they're wearing?
Every good true crime story starts with a 911 call, but sometimes the most chilling evidence comes later. In this case, it wasn't the desperate plea over the phone for help, but a video that could seal a woman's fate. Today, we're dissecting day 2 of the Sarah Boone trial, where the courtroom saw the final terrifying moments of Jorge Torres' life. I'm Drew Breezy, half of the duo known as Drew and John from the Comm Center with Drew Breezy. The centerpiece of day 2, the infamous suitcase video.
Stupid. Sarah. That's my name. Don't worry about it. Sarah, I can't fucking breathe, babe. Therapy. Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me. Sarah.
This footage showing George trapped inside that suitcase is the prosecution's hammer. They're using it to obliterate Sarah Boone's claim that this was all just a tragic accident, a game of hide and seek gone wrong. But there's another layer to this. The defense is claiming that Sarah Boone was a battered spouse and that locking George in the suitcase was a desperate act of self-preservation, maybe a way to keep him at bay while she presumably figured out what to do. I'm not sure that I buy that jack-in-the-box defense. It's definitely tough to watch. You can hear the fear and desperation in George's pleas. He's begging her to let him out, saying that he can't breathe. You've seen the video. And Sarah Boone's reaction, well, she's mocking him. She's taunting him. And at one point, she even laughs. And here's the thing, folks. As this harrowing video played in the courtroom, Sarah Boone's face remained a mask of indifference. All she did was take notes at the end. No tears, no remorse, no visible emotion.
Yeah. You should probably shut the fuck up.
For the record, that was IMG_1062.MOV, now publishing 1063, same respective file name.
And the prosecution is driving home the contrast between George's agony and Sarah's apparent coldness, both in that video and in the courtroom. This lack of reaction could speak volumes to the jury and paint a picture of a woman devoid of any empathy. But the video isn't the only damning evidence. The forensic pathologist's testimony was, no pun intended here, blunt. It was positional asphyxia and blunt force trauma. That's how Jorge Torres died. And the timing of these injuries, well, they match up perfectly with the events in that horrifying video when you tie them into the timestamps on Sarah's videos on her phone. The pathologist testified that the injuries George sustained were inconsistent with Sarah's claims that they were just playing a game of hide and seek. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. A baseball bat was recovered at the scene, and the medical examiner testified that the blunt force trauma on George's body could have been caused by that bat, while he was still in the suitcase maybe. Here's testimony from Dr. Sarah Zaidovitz of the District 9 Medical Examiner's Office.
What other blunt impact injuries did you identify?
So there's a series of ecchymoses on the left side of the back, which right about here.
In your examination, I believe it's on the body chart itself, do you document the height and weight of the person as well?
Yes.
And what was the height of Mr. Torres?
So technically for us, his length, height is the measurement that's taken while someone is standing. So his length was 62 inches, and his weight was 103 pounds.
In regards to these blunt impact injuries, how is it that you come to the conclusion that these injuries were the result of blunt impacts?
So these are typical wounding patterns for blunt force trauma. And when I say blunt force trauma, that can mean something striking a part of the body, or on the other hand, it can be the body striking an object. And that causes injury to the skin, and to the soft tissue, and sometimes the deeper tissues, depending on how severe or how strong that blunt force trauma is.
Injuries consistent with a person being struck with a baseball bat?
They could be, yes.
Are they consistent with a person being pushed down a flight of stairs?
They could be, yes.
Whether or not these injuries occurred while Jorge Torres was in the suitcase?
No.
Why is it that you cannot say that?
So all of these injuries seem to have occurred around the same time, meaning that they're relatively acute or new. They're not things that are healing or something that happened last week. So they all occurred around the same time. But you can't really look at a bruise or a contusion and say, oh, that happened 2 hours ago. There's not a good way to do that.
Are these injuries consistent with them occurring while he was inside the suitcase?
Yes, they could be.
And the evidence keeps piling up. There is DNA under both of their fingernails, which is indicative of a struggle. There were text messages about hiding, showing this wasn't just some innocent game gone wrong. This was a violent struggle. The prosecution is painting a picture of a volatile relationship, one where Sarah Boone was not just a victim, but definitely capable of being an aggressor. Here's digital forensic examiner Janella Wadden of the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
16522, an outgoing incident message at 11:31 p.m. 57 seconds on Christmas 2019. What is the content of that communication?
The content of the message is hide and seek, I shall.
Turning down to 17167, it's an instant message that indicates it's outgoing from this device on January 13th, 2020, 5:01 p.m. 41 seconds. And it's from what is the paren owner? Does that mean it's from the device?
Yes.
What's the content of that text message?
And bless you, and all of you too, I'll get rid of him.
And the next three are also outgoing messages. What do they indicate as far as content?
Starting with 17168, then I'll be better, followed by 17169, ugh, and 17170, Torres.
And then Detective Chelsea Kopsel from the Orange County Sheriff's Office Homicide Section, she took the stand, compelling testimony, she nailed it. She was the one who interviewed Sarah Boone right after the incident and right before the arrest.
And ma'am, do you see the person today here in court who admitted to zipping up Jorge Torres in a suitcase?
Yes, I do.
Do you see the person today here in court whose voice you heard on the suitcase video taunting Jorge Torres?
Yes.
Do you see the person here today in court who admitted to you flipping Jorge Torres while he was in the suitcase?
Yes, I do.
And do you see the person today here in court who admitted going to bed while Jorge Torres continued to suffer in the suitcase?
Yes, I do.
Could you please identify that person by an article of clothing they're wearing?
Yes, she's at the defense table in black and I guess a pinkish top.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witnesses identify the defendant?
Record will so reflect.
Detective Kopsel identified Boone in the courtroom, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind. She told the jury that Sarah denied causing George's death, even though she admitted to zipping him in the suitcase. She also revealed that Sarah never mentioned being in fear for her life or being threatened with any kind of baseball bat or anything like this. This directly contradicts the defense's narrative of self-defense. Detective Kopsel's testimony, coupled with Sarah's own recorded statements, paints a very damning picture. It seems the prosecution is systematically unzipping, dismantling the defense's case, and revealing the truth that's inside. Now, the defense is saying that Sarah Boone was a victim herself, that she was acting in self-defense. They're likely to lean heavily on that battered spouse syndrome defense that's going to come later, trying to convince a jury that Sarah's actions, however horrific, were a result of years of abuse. But will the jury buy it? Because it's a tough sell. The prosecution is already poking holes in that story, highlighting inconsistencies in her statement. For example, she initially told investigators that George locked himself in the suitcase, but the video clearly shows that that's not true. She even contradicted herself later. They're also emphasizing the sheer brutality of what happened to George, arguing that this goes way beyond self-defense. This was something a little more sinister. This trial is far from over, but day two was at least a knockdown punch for the defense. The suitcase video is haunting. The forensic evidence is rock solid. And Sarah Boone's own demeanor, her words captured on that video, might be her downfall. Detective Kopsel's testimony was compelling. But before you go, let's talk about the bigger picture, because this case raises some very serious questions about domestic violence, the role of digital evidence in the courtroom, and the complexities of the justice system. What do you think about the battered spouse syndrome defense in this case? Let us know in the comments what you think of this case so far. Is Sarah Boone a victim of abuse driven to a desperate act, or is she a cold-blooded killer? I'm Drew Breezy. On behalf of actual 911 dispatcher John, I appreciate you supporting the Comm Center. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on any podcast platform or at our website, thecommcenter.com.